One mistake I see a lot of people making is that they get the pledge from an investor to do a deal. They think that's a time to celebrate and they're really excited and happy. Every time we get that pledge, I kind of feel a weight of responsibility that it's now time to actually do our job.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association, providing benefits and services to real estate investors and rental property owners for over 48 years. With your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group.
Hi, everyone. Before we get started, I would like to thank all of you for listening to this show, and hopefully you've been getting a lot of value from it. I know I certainly have enjoyed hosting it and talking to all of our great guests. And one thing I would like to ask you, if you've been enjoying this show, is that you go to iTunes and subscribe, rate, and review. By giving us a rating and a review, it really helps to drive more listeners to the show and allows us to continue providing the great content that we've been bringing to you so far. Here's a review from Jack Butala. He says, fantastic podcast, informative, interesting, and entertaining, 5 stars. Thank you, Jack, for taking the time to leave that review. I'd like to encourage everyone to leave a quick review and star rating on iTunes. That will really help drive more listeners to the show. Speaking of the show, let's get on with it. Hello and welcome to episode 40. My guest today is Joe Pohlen, a successful investor and entrepreneur here in the Grand Rapids area. Joe got his start investing and managing high-end single-family student rentals, and he's since grown his portfolio to larger apartment communities in Kalamazoo, Grand Rapids, Lansing, and Battle Creek, which he oversees through his management company called Ancora Management. Joe is also co-founder of Cardinal Senior Management, which specializes in acquiring and operating independent and assisted living communities. He also has extensive turnaround and receivership experience through his past occupation as a project manager with Amicus Management. Joe has also been named as one of the top 40 under 40 by the Grand Rapids Business Journal and Big Brother of the Year in 2010. So I'm very happy, very excited to have him on the show today. Joe, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Brian. Really appreciate it.
That's a very impressive resume to start with, but we're going to kind of take it piece by piece here. And I'd like to go back to the beginning and how you got started in real estate investing.
Well, excellent. Well, I got started in real estate investing in 2006. I was a sophomore at Grand Valley State University. I decided to go to Grand Valley to study entrepreneurship. And I was living in Allendale, Michigan at the time. I was renting an apartment with some friends. And my friends and I were looking for a place to live downtown. Now, back in 2000,
downtown Grand Rapids.
Yes, downtown Grand Rapids. For those of you who know Allendale, there wasn't a lot going on for a 19 or 20-year-old, and the Grand Rapids seemed like the big city, so we decided to start looking for a place to live. And I quickly realized when I was talking with landlords and other people to rent downtown Grand Rapids, the landlords really didn't understand the student community, didn't understand what students were looking for. You can kind of tell that by the way they were pricing their apartments for rent or their single-family homes for rent. And I realized that Grand Valley students and students in general would rent on a per-bedroom basis as opposed to a per-house basis. So what I was really only looking for was how much my room was going to cost. I wasn't really interested in the total cost of the entire house, which made 5 and 6 bedroom homes extremely appetizing because Grand Valley students would pay $350 a bedroom, and they would have, if you have 6 bedrooms, a lot more in a single family rental than you could get. So I bought my first house in 2006 between my sophomore year and my junior year. And what we did was I bought the house, and my dad and I worked on the basement. We took a 4-bedroom house and we made it into a 6-bedroom house. And
You added 2 units in the basement?
2 bedrooms. It was a walkout basement, so we just dug 2 egress windows and put 2 bedrooms in there. And then I had 5 friends who wanted and needed a place to live. So it was the 6 of us that all lived together, and that kind of what got me kicked off. One thing that was great about students was the fact that they paid their rent in student loans. So you got all the money up front. So all 5 of my roommates all paid their rent up front. So I was sitting on a sizable amount of cash. But the first house I bought was $100,000, had 5 roommates, and I lived there for a year and decided that I was going to rent the house out and move to another house. So over the next 6 years, I would just move every year and buy another house owner occupied, move in with roommates, rent it, and then go ahead and buy another house. And that's kind of how I got my portfolio started.
Were you going through school the entire time?
Yeah, I was going through school. I have a degree in entrepreneurship and a degree in public administration from Grand Valley.
Perfect to have an entrepreneurship degree and at the same time be getting lots of money from renting out bedrooms to your friends.
Yeah, the way I saw it was kind of like a full ride scholarship is kind of how I looked at my first house. I was getting $1,750 a month in rent. We were splitting utilities 6 ways, and my mortgage payment was $914 a month. So that covered, obviously my housing was covered. Most of my, all my utilities were covered or they were minimal. And the amount I was paying to go to Grand Valley plus the amount for books was covered by the cash flow I was making on that first house.
How were you able to get the loan? Was it your dad who got the loan for you?
Well, if a lot of people remember 2006, 2007, 2008, it was the wild, wild west of real estate lending. I owned a business. I started a business when I was in high school, custom printing t-shirts. And because I had been doing that for 3 years, I was technically self-employed, is what showed on my tax return. And this was back when they were doing no-doc loans. They were doing stated income, verified asset loans, and some crazy things that they don't do anymore. And literally a 18-year-old college student working as a dishwasher at a buffet and selling a few t-shirts on the side, they were doing 105% loan to appraisal. You're doing 0 down loans. So I was able to pick up my first 5 houses before the real estate crash because of those really lax loan programs, which, turned out to be really beneficial to me.
So, wow. So you were actually walking away with cash at close then, if you were getting 105%.
Yeah. And like a really irresponsible 19-year-old, I spent every penny of it, which I would not advise anyone to do. But it was a time where young people could get in and buying houses. I had started the Grand Valley Real Estate Group at Grand Valley. We got, I'd probably say close to a dozen, if not a little bit more, of my friends also joined the group, and they were buying real estate properties. So there's about core 8 to 10 of us who all owned properties all in the same area. We shared tenants. We helped with screening. We would get together, I think, every Tuesday night, and that became kind of my core group of friends.
Wow. Okay. There's so much there to talk about. Starting with when you bought the properties, did you put any money into them, or were you just getting them for almost nothing down and actually maybe getting a little bit of money at close because you're getting 105% loan to value? Did they need any improvements? Yeah,
they needed improvements, but what we were doing was mainly cosmetic improvements, paint, floor coverings. We would sometimes add bedrooms in the basement, so dig out an egress window to add some bedrooms. A couple of the houses, we took a half bathroom and turned it into a full bathroom, because if you have 6 people living in a house and only one shower, not the best setup. So if we could add another shower, that's something that we would do. I often tell people, of all the tenants I've ever had, the absolute worst tenant I've ever had was myself. Me and my friends didn't treat the properties very nice. So, the rehab we did ahead of time, most of the rehab was done right before we moved out.
Okay. So you live there, trash it, and then fix it up before you move out.
Exactly.
Were you managing them yourself?
So I was self-managing the first 4. And then after 4, that's when the real estate market took a dive. I was left. Going into the real estate crash, I thought I was the smartest person in the world. The ego was too big to fit in a room, and really got hammered pretty hard. Lost all the equity I had in my properties. I was underwater on each one, but I was really lucky and fortunate that Grand Valley had continued to grow. So my rents were growing each month, and I wasn't in any loans that were called or variable interest loans. So as long as I was collecting the rent, I was able to make the payments. Didn't matter what my equity situation was. But I was a really irresponsible landlord. I did not do things the way they were supposed to be done. Wasn't doing the lease commencement checklists. The leases I had were just stuff I found on the internet and didn't really vet. I didn't have any systems in place. I was not a good manager. And at that time, I was fortunate enough to meet up with a man by the name of James Erdmans. Some people might know him. He owns American Realty Property Management. And James has been a mentor for me almost 10 years now. And he offered and was willing to take over the management of my properties, kind of show me how it's supposed to be done. So at House 5, I decided to hire a property management company, and they've been my property management company for the single family homes I have in Grand Rapids ever since then.
Great. So let's go back to the bubble bursting. I mean, it seems like you were way over leveraged on these properties as far as the equity and the loan to value ratio. But it also sounds like you had 30-year fixed loans?
Correct.
So those, as long as you were paying those loans, it didn't really matter what the value of the home was.
That's correct.
And your rents were always enough, and you were getting those rents in order to cover all your expenses, including the loan.
That's correct. I was never, and still to this day, the way I look at real estate investments is cash flow is extremely important to me. That's what I look for. If we get appreciation, if the assets appreciate in value, and I score big 15 to 20 years from now when we finally sell, that's great. But I was always, and still to this day, evaluate on cash flow, not hoping to make my money on appreciation.
Yeah, and conversely, if the values go down, you're still okay, because as long as the rents stay strong enough that you can continue paying your bills.
Correct.
Yeah, and during that period, because Grand Valley State University was growing, I assume that there was plenty of people who wanted to rent your properties?
There was a lot of people that wanted to rent the properties downtown. What I understood, which a lot of the other landlords at the time didn't understand, was the pull and the draw and the attraction to Grand Valley. I bought all my houses over on the west side of Grand Rapids. There's a bus line, the 50 bus line, which I was very familiar with. I had my classes both in Allendale and in Grand Rapids. So all of us took the 50 bus line. So if you could find houses that were near bus stops, they were extremely valuable to college students, because if you're going to have 4, 5, or 6 college students all living together, there's a very good chance that one person is not going to have a vehicle. So being close to the bus line really opens you up to a lot of groups. So I was very, very active right around the Lake Michigan Drive and Garfield bus stop. So my strategy was buy houses that are 4 bedrooms that 4 college kids would live in, that is walking distance to the Lake Michigan Drive and Garfield bus stop. Also walking distance in that area was grocery store and Putt Putt's Bar, which is a favorite bar of myself and many others here in Grand Rapids. And that was my strategy. That was the simple plan. Was I knew Grand Valley kids would want to live there. I knew it was convenient for them, and I knew they'd pay anywhere from $350 to $450 for a bedroom in that area.
That's a fantastic specific strategy as far as location and convenience is concerned. So once the bubble burst, were you then picking up more properties?
Yeah. So when the bubble had bursted, I was able to find properties for very inexpensive amounts. I mean, things you were paying $80,000 for, 2 years later you're paying $15,000 for. And at that time, I was working with James, who had, I think Patrick Spitzley had talked about this before on your podcast, about picking up properties that allow you to go in and do all new electrical, all new plumbing, do new kitchens, roof, parking, the everything. So at that time, I'd gotten into doing those kind of large scale renovations, and that's kind of where my portfolio took off from there.
Great. So you were going in and doing like the full on rehabs.
Yeah.
Picking them up for what, 15, 20,000?
Yeah, picking them up in the anywhere from 15 to 40,000 and putting in anywhere from 80 to 110,000 in renovations.
Wow. Okay. So you were making them really nice.
Yeah, really great properties. One of the things about the older houses in Grand Rapids, really not equipped for college students because there's a pretty large electrical load that college kids put on a property. When each of them are treating their bedroom like their own apartment, you're oftentimes going to have 4 to 5 TVs in 4 or 5 computers. You're going to have
mini fridges and
microwaves. Mini fridge and microwaves in each of the rooms. So we quickly found that it's necessary if you're going to do a college rental to drastically upgrade the electrical and then the plumbing. A lot of them are old houses, so going with the PEX tubing, get that water pressure for the upstairs bathrooms is extremely important.
Yeah, what were you upgrading the electrical from and to?
I mean, we were upgrading from the knob and tube to code for Grand Rapids right now.
Okay, yeah, that's a lot of these old properties, the electrical is an issue, especially when it comes to insurance companies. They want to see 60 to 100 amps per unit. For you with the house, that would probably be a little bit different. But.
Yeah, I've bought in 3 properties from insurance companies that were total burnout fires caused by electrical issues. So it's something, if you're going through these old houses, it's not just some insurance guy said it's probably bad to have knob and tube. I've seen it. It's really dangerous.
And you were using American Realty's team to do the rehabs for you?
They partner and own a company called Easttown Construction. So I was using Easttown Construction for all the renovations.
That's a great way to get started in real estate. I mean, as a student, buying houses that you and your friends could live in and then just sort of hacking your way from one house to another. Yeah,
as you know, and a lot of other people know, the loan requirements for owner-occupied, and they call them dormer tenants or residents living in. There's a very specific way it's presented on the loan application. I'm sure there's plenty of people listening who understand this better than I do, but it was allowed me to quickly pick up quite a few assets. But in return, I ended up with a tremendous amount of roommates. I was doing an SBA loan, and they had asked for all the places you had lived in the last 10 years, and I think I was over 14 different places in the last 10 years I had lived.
But had you owned all those places?
Yes, yeah. And I think I was counting up with a friend. I believe I've had over 36 roommates since 2006, so it's been a trip.
That's a lot of references for your next.
Yes.
So before we go forward, let's go backward a little bit, because you had mentioned being an entrepreneur and having a T-shirt printing company or a screen printing company.
Yes, I had. When I was in high school, I started a company called Joe's Custom Clothing, and what we would do is we screen print and embroider for the high school soccer team, the volleyball team, the class T-shirts, those kind of things, and that's kind of how I raised the money to be able to go to college at Grand Valley.
Wow! So was this a business where you had purchased the equipment to do it, or were you leasing out someone's space? I mean, how exactly did you set that up?
So the T-shirt printing business it's pretty easy to kind of be a third-party T-shirt printer. So what I would do was, there's a lot of places you can bulk order T-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, everything you need. You can bulk order those, get them shipped to you, or drop ship to a printer, a screen printer. And each screen printer will have very different pricing if you provide the garments. So all I was doing is I'd go out, get the order. I would work and do the design with whoever would be designing the products. So we'd work with the Grand Valley, or not Grand Valley. I went to Brighton High School, so we did the Brighton High School soccer team. So it'd say Brighton High School soccer, the year, and I'd do that design actually in PowerPoint.
So you'd create the design yourself?
Create the design myself, get it approved, pick up the order, and then once I got the order, I took a 50% deposit up front. Then I would order all the garments, send them to a printer. Printer would print them, and then I'd deliver them, and they would look like they came from me, and I would collect the rest of the payment, and that kind of.
And you were doing this while you were in high school.
Yeah.
So where does this spirit of entrepreneurship come from? I mean, most high school students aren't. They're working. Well, I don't know. When I was in high school, we were all working at McDonald's or the movie theater or Taco Bell. You're starting your own T-shirt printing business. I mean, where does that come from?
Neither of my parents own their own business. I think it came from I was in when I was 16. I was working at Men's Warehouse selling suits and that kind of ties, etc. And one of the guys I worked with, his name was Sir Charles, and he was kind of a mentor for me. He was explaining how the T-shirt business worked, and it seemed pretty straightforward to me. If I went out and got a T-shirt order, which I played soccer, so I got the soccer team order. I knew what our team was about to pay for all of our jerseys and sweatshirts, etc. And I looked at the price, and I looked at the cost of printing, and I looked at the cost of the garments, and the margins were well over 200%. And I talked to our soccer coach, and I'm like, hey, I can print these. I'll go get them printed, and I charged 150% margin. And on the first order, you make a few $1,000s. And at 16 years old, I was making like $5.15 an hour at Men's Warehouse. And I was like, well, I just made as much as in one order as I was planning to make all summer at Men's Warehouse working part-time. So I guess just went out and kept rolling with it. And it's kind of what I didn't even want to go to college. I just wanted to continue to grow my business and be an entrepreneur. And that's kind of why I went to Grand Valley to study entrepreneurship.
And that what you learned about entrepreneurship from doing it yourself and all that, how does that apply to real estate?
I think it applies to real estate, and it helps me in the area of looking at our tenants as residents and as customers, and understanding you're in a service business when you are a landlord. And I think approaching it in that manner, having a staff that's well dressed, having a correct way to answer the phone when a person calls in with a maintenance request, when your customers calls in with a maintenance request, understand that it's your job to impress them. And I think if approaching real estate that way with that mindset has allowed a certain level of success.
So client satisfaction, sales and marketing, all that's important to
correct
real estate.
I believe so.
So let's move back forward then. So you had the success with student housing and owning these properties that you were living in, renting out rooms to your friends, and you took that. It sounds like as far as you wanted to before moving on to the next level. What was the next level for you?
So after college, I got a job I was really, really fortunate to get this job. I'd interned at a company called Grubb & Ellis, which is now Colliers. Today, I was their data intern when I was in school. And I'd wanted to get into commercial real estate. And I graduated in 2010 from Grand Valley. And this was right in the middle of the recession. There was not a lot of job or opportunities. And I had no idea what a court-appointed receiver was, but someone I'd interned for had gotten a job at a court-appointed receiver, and I messaged her, and she's like, yeah, we're hiring interns here. We're growing rapidly. And so I showed up, and the day I showed up, I got hired. And I worked for two guys, one named Dan Yeomans, the other one, Ross Pope, who also became mentors for me. And I got in to see the day-to-day details of how apartments and different businesses are run. We did a lot of work for the Department of Justice, different local banks, and different creditors. And what a court-appointed receiver is when there's a dispute between a borrower and a creditor, the creditor can step in and petition the circuit court to run that person's business or run the asset that is not being paid on or agreed upon, so that the borrower and the creditor can then sort out how they want to handle the dispute. So The court then is responsible for running all these different things from apartment buildings and self-storage buildings, fruit stands, manufacturing businesses. And I was given the opportunity to kind of be the tip of the spear for the court system and go into these businesses, meet with the business owners. I was given the power to hire and fire staff, make changes, liquidate inventory. A huge opportunity that I'm extremely grateful for being able to work there. I worked there from 2010 to 2012. But the one thing I learned very, very valuable there was the opportunities that the court system has available when those assets are sold. So those assets are distressed. The court system takes control of those assets, they stabilize them, and then they liquidate them. And I was watching people buying buying businesses, and I knew the intricate workings of the business, and it's very obvious that the person purchasing these businesses is going to make a sizable return. And I left in 2012 from Amicus Management to then begin purchasing assets out of receivership and purchasing distressed assets and doing similar work to what I was doing at Amicus, but I considered it finishing the job, actually turning the asset and investing the money and time necessary to make it a profitable business. And that's in 2012 when I started Ancora with my best friend, Dom Grunveld. And Dom and I had both worked at Amicus, both been part of the Grand Valley Real Estate Group. We're really close, still close to this day. He was the best man at my wedding. I was the best man at his wedding. And we started Ancora at that time. And we've then grown with that philosophy to today.
Before we get into Ancora and the larger apartment communities that you've purchased, let's go back to Amicus, because you were there from 2010, 2012. So this was when a lot of the recession was we were, looking back, we know we were coming out of the recession at that point, but we were still in the thick of it, in 2010, 2012. So the businesses that you were taking in receivership and helping turn around, were they all kinds of businesses or primarily real estate related?
They were all kind of businesses. So the way Amicus was structured was there was project managers, and then there's kind of junior project managers. So the junior project managers, that's what Dom and myself really got into the nuts and bolts, nitty gritty detail of individual projects. And then the project manager really oversaw all the different projects that we were doing. So the projects I worked on a fruit stand and farmer's market up in the Cadillac area. I worked on a motel in Benton Harbor. I worked on a lot of apartment buildings. I worked on some car washes. I worked on some vacant industrial buildings. Some of the other projects Amicus took over was an international importing, exporting car business. So it's all kinds of different businesses.
And were these businesses in trouble mainly because of the recession? They were having trouble paying the debt that was owed on them, and the bank had to basically kind of take it through the foreclosure process?
That is, some of the assets were that way. Some of the assets were tax evasion, where the Department of Justice has stepped in and taken over the asset and thrown the business owners in jail for not paying their taxes.
So you're dealing with management issues, as well. Okay.
A lot of management issues. Some of the assets were a bank went out of business, so the FDIC took over all of their loans, and if the person wasn't
performing
paying,
and non-performing.
Yeah, performing and non-performing, and had put a lot of the assets into receivership, so it was working with the FDIC or whatever the servicing bank was. So it was a wide range of...
So I'm curious of the apartments, because you said you looked at a number or worked on a number of apartments during that period. What would you say were the primary issues that people you were working with who were in trouble? Was it a management issue, an ownership issue, or was it more just not being able to pay on the debt service?
I think it was kind of a perfect storm for the apartments that got taken back by the banks. First thing was in 2008, a lot of the banks were over lending on apartment deals. I mean, I was talking to people had owned apartments and gotten loans at that time that they were doing 85, 90%. Bank, you show up at the closing table and the bank's like, would you like to borrow another $150,000? We'll just slap it on your loan and put it in your bank account. And people were taking advantage of that. And a lot of these apartments were student housing apartments. That's actually why I got hired at Amicus, because I had experience managing student housing. And down in Kalamazoo at Western had a huge drop in their student enrollment. And when the student enrollment dropped, all the apartments started seeing some vacancy. The off-campus apartments started seeing vacancy. All of them began dropping their rates, and it became a bloodbath. And then a few of the apartment buildings went back to the bank. So then the bank put us, the receiver, in place. Because we had no debt service on it, we just dropped the rates even farther, which then hurt the market even further. And it, as you can see, it's kind of like a downward spiral. So that's what happened to the apartments that I was closely involved with.
Yeah, so it was a perfect storm of just every possible factor kind of working against these properties.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's move ahead to Ancora then. So you and Dom, your friend, decided to form Ancora. What was your goal in the beginning?
So our goal at Ancora was to build an apartment complex portfolio where we owned and managed our own assets that produced really strong cash flow and allowed us the opportunity to do with our life what we wanted to do with our life and spend our free time enjoying our free time. So to get wealthy was our goal.
And were you kind of leveraging the assets that you were working on at Amicus and picking some of those up and putting them in Ancora?
So one of the things that was great about my experience working at Amicus was understanding how to purchase assets out of receivership. There's a very specific program in place. There's a lot of times the IRS is involved. A lot of times the state of Michigan's involved. There's a lot of liens that need to be removed. There's kind of a complicated process to purchase assets.
To jump through.
Yeah, but if you know how to do it, it's really not that challenging. So what I was able to do was meet up with a group of investors that were very interested in purchasing apartments. They saw the value there. So Dom and I worked with them, and the basic deal that we had with them was we'll identify the assets, we'll underwrite it, we'll explain how the deal will make money. We all purchase it together. We'll put in all the work, and you put up all the cash, and we'll split everything 50-50 was the deal that we worked with them. And we continued that model all the way till today.
Great. And so let's that model is taking you where? I mean, you own property. You own property in Battle Creek, Lansing, Kalamazoo, and Grand Rapids.
That's correct.
How many units do you own altogether?
We have 464 units.
464. And these are all apartment communities of varying size.
Yes. Everything from a 6-bedroom townhome to a studio apartment.
Okay. And how did you choose these different areas?
So we're looking for the cash flow. We're looking for value. We're looking for turnaround opportunities where you can buy an apartment building, invest some money into cosmetics and maybe even some structural, and rent the units for a higher amount and increase the value. That's what we were interested in doing.
You began that model in 2012. How has that model changed?
Well, it's been harder and harder to find assets that fit that model. We originally got started in Kalamazoo, and because it's now getting harder to find turnaround opportunities in Kalamazoo, we expanded outside of Kalamazoo to Schoolcraft, to Galesburg, to Portage, and then it became harder to find opportunities, and we expanded then to Battle Creek, and we also expanded recently in 2016 to Lansing. And actually Lansing now is over half of our portfolio.
Oh, okay. And you guys are managing, you also have a management company, so you're not just asset managing the properties, but actively managing the properties.
Correct. We don't manage or do any third-party management of anything we don't own. We used to do some third-party management, but it really didn't fit with our philosophy of what we were trying to accomplish. But yes, we do everything from answering tenant phone calls, maintenance requests, showings, to paying the bills, working with banks and investors.
Well, let's talk about your philosophy. What is your management philosophy?
Our management philosophy is building better communities, and we do that through treating our residents like customers. And I grew up living in an apartment building. Every time we go visit an apartment, I see me and my friends and my brother and sister playing around in the woods outside the apartment building. I want to create a great community and a safe and place to live for the people who are our customers. I think it's our job and our responsibility to be good stewards of those assets, and we take that role and that responsibility very seriously.
And having grown up in an apartment, what did you learn from living in an apartment community that you take with you in your day-to-day operations?
I think that great people live in apartments. I think that's kind of what I took. Regular people who need good quality housing. That's kind of what I took from that experience.
All right. Well, let's talk about one of your properties then. And I know you brought a case study with you, and I think now's a good time to talk about it. This is a property in Lansing?
Yes, it's a property in Lansing. It's actually the first asset that we bought in Lansing. So it was the first thing that brought us to Lansing to do. It was in 52 apartments. They were listed. They were on the market for 3 or 4 months. The owner had owned quite a few apartments over in the Detroit area. This was his only apartment building in Lansing, so it was kind of a little bit of a headache. He was trying to self-manage the asset, or was self-managing it with maintenance guys out of Port Huron. He went through a couple different leasing agents, so it was kind of a headache for him. When we were looking at it, the asset was over 30% vacant. So in apartments, that's extremely worrisome.
It's very hard to get financing on a property that's 30% vacant.
Yes, it's not considered a good opportunity. So the first thing we saw with that, it was called Grove Park. The first thing we saw with that was obviously the vacancy issue. So we called the number on the sign. Didn't get a call back, called the number on the sign again, didn't get a call back, didn't see any.
So this was a drive-by you saw?
Well, it was listed, but whenever a property's listed, we'll go and shop. We call it shopping the property, so we'll act like one of the tenants. So we actually get the experience of a potential customer, what the relationship would be like for any of the current residents or current customers. And when no one was getting a call back for a showing, we did set up one showing. The person didn't show up on time to do the showing. There was no ads online in the kind of areas that we post our ads online. So we felt very strongly that the issue that the apartment complex was having wasn't related to demand in Lansing. We felt it was an issue related to how well the current property management company was capturing future residents and future tenants.
How poorly they were capturing.
Yeah, exactly. So we thought we had a great opportunity here, and we felt that it was priced really, really aggressively. We ended up picking that asset up for $1.2 million. And we have a strong relationship with a local bank here in Grand Rapids that was willing to go to Lansing and do a loan for us in Lansing. And we picked that up for $1.2 million. Our loan with the bank here in Grand Rapids was right about $1 million. And then we needed to raise what we felt was $450,000 in private money. So the $200,000 needed to put down on the building, plus the about $250,000 that we would need for closing costs, escrows, and initial repairs that we'd have to do in the building. And we bought that asset in middle of January. And we have one unit that's vacant there right now. So we filled up 16 of the apartments, and we should have the last unit filled any time now. So that puts us above.
That's January of 2016.
Yeah,
so
January
for 9-10 months.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things about buying a distressed asset is you have a huge opportunity to get do a refinance. So we hopefully will be doing a refinance here before the end of the year. And we believe the value will come in the area of 1.9 to 2.1. So, really create a tremendous amount of value there.
$900,000 in value that you've added to the property.
Yes. So the thing that's going to be great about that is if we can get the appraisal, get the equity there, then we can do a refinance, and our investors who put the cash up in the deal can get their $450,000 back, which is the structure that we structure with our investors.
So you found this deal. It had been listed for a couple months?
I think it had been really listed for about 5 months. It had not been getting a lot of interest. Mm-hmm. And mainly the reason it hadn't been getting a lot of interest is the high vacancy and the location in South Lansing. One of the things you'll find is it's very competitive when you're looking at apartment buildings for sale when they have a really strong track record. They've been making money for a while, or well over 95% occupied, and there's no problems with them. You'll find there's a lot of we've found there's a lot of opportunity in what are called tweener apartment deals. So they are too small to have an on-site manager and kind of too large to be residential financing. So anything over 4 units, under about 100 units are, some people call them tweeners. That's what we target. Our management system and style has been set up to go after and manage those assets.
Yeah, and that's a great place to be, because the smaller investors usually don't have the money to do those kind of deals. The larger, more corporate type investors, they want the bigger deals. They want the 150 to 500 unit deals. So doing those tweeners, there's a lot less competition.
Yes, and a lot more opportunity for value there. The corporate and the large investors, they'll go after 100 to 5,000 units because they can afford to put an on-site manager. Now, what we're finding in the property management business, your tenant, your customer, they don't want to talk to you. They don't want to see you. They want to be taken care of. They want to handle everything via their cell phone. So we have a cell phone app that allow you to put in maintenance requests. All of our showings are scheduled online. You can pay your rent online. We don't charge a fee for paying your rent online. And we're trying to streamline our company. So if you don't want to see your landlord in person, you don't have to see your landlord in person. Everything is handled for you, and it's easy to track and easy to see what's been done.
Nice. So you actually developed an app for this?
Well, we use Rent Manager, which is our software provider, and we use their system.
Okay, so they have an app that your tenants can download. Well, that's great. So you picked up this tweener. You determined it needed about $250,000 in improvements?
Well, we figured it needed $50,000 for closing costs and what we call cash reserves, which is just amount of money in the bank. And we had
because when you buy, the bank or the lender quite often wants you to have a certain amount per door.
Certain lenders do. Ours doesn't require that, but we, you plan on having some money in the bank. You don't run that thing down to zero each month. Mm-hmm. But we figured about $30,000 in cash reserves, $20,000 for closing costs, and about $200,000 for cosmetic improvements. Because a lot of those vacant units, no one's lived there for a while. We wanted to go through and replace cabinets, countertops, paint, floor coverings. We actually did a pretty sizable capital improvement on all the common areas. So we did all new carpet, new paint, new light fixtures, and really spruced up the common areas. We added a laundry room so the tenants have a place to use laundry. We did a new signage. We rebranded the property. It's now called Woodland Oaks. It's no longer called Grove Park. One of the things you'll find on apartments is if you type in the name of the apartment building, it'll come up with all the reviews that have ever gone on in the apartment. A lot of times those, like at Grove Park, were really, really negative reviews. A lot of times all the apartment deals that we've done, we do a bed bug inspection on average in an apartment complex. A good apartment complex will only have about 15% of their units will have bed bugs. Something like Grove Park, some of the other buildings we've taken over have had bed bugs in 85% of the units.
Wow.
So that's a sizable project to rid yourself of those bed bugs. We take bed bugs extremely seriously. A lot of other apartment owners won't talk about bed bugs. They'll just pretend it doesn't happen. We actually purchase insurance for each of the units that we do treat for bed bugs. So even if the resident brings bed bugs back into the unit, our insurance covers it to fix what's going on with the issue.
Is that something the insurance company provides, or are you buying that with the vendor who does the bed bug?
We purchase the insurance through the vendor.
Okay. Wow.
Through our bed bug vendor, which I would highly advise anyone who's a property manager or anyone who's an owner to look into your plan of action for bed bugs. There's heat treating is oftentimes sold to you as the best route. We have found that chemical treating is the best route for us and works the best. So I would
the right type of chemical treating.
Yes, of course. I mean, you know, licensed professional. We actually have a third-party company that we use that uses NASDAQ certified dogs, actually. So these dogs have been trained to search for bed bugs, and we actually double check the work that our vendor does ourselves. So we pay the amount per unit to have the units checked, and we take the bed bug issue extremely seriously. And it's something I think a lot of landlords need to pay a little bit more attention to.
Yeah, I remember looking at a 60 unit in Lansing, and I think Amicus actually was marketing this. You know which one I'm talking about?
Yes, I know which one I'm talking about.
And we did our we had it under contract for a brief minute, and we did our inspection, and every tenant that was home at the time, which was most of them, came up and told us all about the bed bugs. And in fact, one woman had a jar full of bed bugs that she had collected. And we got out of there as fast as we could because what happens is the tenants. Oh, well, there were two things that happens. One is a tenant gets evicted because they're not paying their rent. They put all their furniture out by the garbage, but because they had bed bugs, that furniture has bed bugs in it. Other tenants in that property would then go and take that furniture and bring it into their unit. So those bed bugs would get spread around like that. And the owner was using, I think he was using the spray that you could go buy at Home Depot or something. But it wasn't really killing the bed bugs. It was just forcing them out of that particular unit into other units. So he was using the chemical treatment, but it was not the right type of chemical treatment.
Yeah, what we'll do is we'll treat on each side of the unit, plus the unit that we're treating, plus the common areas, and have a regular scheduled program for the common areas that goes along with our carpet cleaning. But it's something that take note of and make sure you have a plan in place for bed bugs, because the plan or the strategy that it hasn't happened yet and maybe it won't happen to me is just not responsible.
Yeah. So who does your bed bug treatments for you?
You know, I don't have the name of the vendor. They're down in Kalamazoo. I could probably get it to you. You could put on the show notes, or people could email me for the name of our vendor. But I'm happy to share it. I just don't have it on the top of my head.
Okay. So the bed bug, obviously you take bed bugs very seriously. What are some of the other issues that you encounter that you have to take seriously as well?
Safety. When a lot of the times these apartment buildings will have, you'll have 52 units. If one or two of the apartment residents that are there are throwing a lot of parties, having a lot of guests over, are becoming, are just not nice, not neighbors that your rest of your residents want to have. You have to be willing to have strong and meaningful conversations with those residents and let them know what their actions are doing to the community. We use the word community a lot, and we try to build better communities, and we do that through not being afraid to have difficult conversations with our residents if their actions aren't appropriate.
Mm-hmm. And is it written into your lease what's appropriate, or what?
Yeah, we
have grounds to remove someone if they're not living up to your standards.
Correct. We have a pretty thorough lease, and we spend a lot of time going over our leases with our residents and make it very clear from the beginning what expectations are for the landlord, what is expected from us, and what they can expect from us, and in return, what's expected from our residents.
Let's go back to this 52 unit. So, and talk about some of the numbers. You bought it. It was 30% vacant, 70% occupied. How did you even get the local bank here in Grand Rapids to give you a loan on this property? Because this is a troubled asset.
So we have a long relationship with the bank here in Grand Rapids. They've done the loans.
You can say the name of the bank.
United Bank in Grand Rapids. So we have a long relationship with United Bank. They've done a lot of loans for us. And the investors that we use on this deal have also had a long history of being United Bank customers. So they felt very strong with the personal guarantees that were attached to the loan.
Yeah, because you're talking about a recourse loan.
Yes, full recourse.
This would not be a non-recourse loan.
Correct. All the loans that we've done are full recourse.
So they trusted you, and they said, "Okay, we will take this chance with you to go that you can make this asset work and turn it around."
Correct. They've seen what we've done on our other properties in Kalamazoo. They felt strong with the team that we had behind, with Dom and myself, of being able to turn this property around.
Yeah, which you've done pretty quickly. It seems like you bought it for roughly $20,000 a door.
Yeah, right in that area.
And there were 16 vacant units that you went in and you had to turn. How much did you put into each unit as you turned them?
We put in anywhere from about $5,000 to $8,000 a unit, depending on what needed to be done.
$5,000 to $8,000 a unit. And then as far as like the common area and other improvements, how much did you put into that?
We put in about $50,000 into the common areas.
And that's new carpet, new paint in the hallways.
And new signage, parking lot striping. One of the things a lot of people miss is those common areas. They see it kind of as a waste, kind of exterior lighting. We see that as extremely important. A lot of times people will buy apartment buildings and they never drove past them at night. We always make it part of our due diligence to visit the property at night to kind of check on the exterior lighting. A lot of times an apartment owner will only visit their building in the daytime, and they'll look around and all the lights, it looks like they have exterior lights, but then you go to the building, there might be a back dark corner of a parking lot, exterior light over a doorway that's burnt out, and your maintenance person will never see it. And a lot of times residents will not put that in as a maintenance request. They'll think another resident's going to put it in as a maintenance request, and these things go unnoticed. So we make it a point to, even the assets that we own, to visit them at night to check on our exterior lighting.
What else might you notice at night?
Well, I mean, you don't notice the kind of cars in the parking lot. One of the things that we joke about, Dom and I joke about, is when we visit an apartment complex, if it doesn't have 2 or 3 immobile cars, then it's something we're not really interested in. It's some kind of like one of those signs of an asset that hasn't been managed properly. So
you want to see the broken down cars in the parking lot?
Well, we'll get those removed immediately. We'll get them towed.
But it tells you that the management isn't doing the job they need to be doing.
Yeah, I mean, if you go visit an apartment complex and you visit it, in the winter time, and there's a broken down car that's piled high with snow, and that thing hasn't been moved all winter, it's a good sign that someone's really not watching that community. Someone's really not taking the necessary steps to manage in the way that we feel a property complex should be managed.
Mm-hmm. So you check it at night. What are some of the other things that you go through?
I think the most important thing to do is look through the eyes of your customer. A lot of the building, like the one at Grove Park, the target's working class families there. If you just worked all day, you've got kids going to the local school, you're coming to go do a showing, you're probably doing a showing after work, probably on the weekend or after 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. You're tired. Like, where would you want to live? I think it's really important to, when you're underwriting one of these deals, is take the time to do the emotional side of what your customer will experience. And what would you want to see? Would you want to see, ripped screens on the exterior of buildings? What impression would that give you? Parking lot striping is a really big thing. Signage is a big thing, and exterior lighting are really big things. And then when you enter the building, what kind of lock system is in place in the building? How's the common area lighting? What does it smell like? I can't reiterate enough how important smell is. I mean, anyone who's bought in anything, when you come home and it smells like cookies, that's great. You're warm. We actually used to do that in our student housing. Whenever we had a showing set up, we would baked cookies. So when the person would come in to do the showing, they would give them a free cookie, but the whole apartment would smell like warm chocolate chip cookies. I mean,
well, how do you control the smell in the hallways?
Clean.
You want to keep it clean. 'Cause you have people who are cooking all types of food.
Yep.
So how do you what do you do? What specifically can you do to control those smells?
You can set up a weekly or bi-weekly program for doing interior hallway cleaning, and that includes vacuuming and wiping down walls and washing the windows. Most apartment complexes don't have a set schedule for that. We actually have someone on our payroll who goes and does common areas, and they just rotate through all of our different communities. They do trash pickup on the outside of the apartment. We do all interior cleaning once to twice a week, and they have to wipe down the walls, do the windows, and just keep an expected level of cleanliness. Because what you'll find is if you keep the common areas up, your tenants do a lot better job of keeping the common areas up. If the common areas start slipping, as soon as they start slipping, if you don't get on it immediately, it falls off really, really quickly. And it's just human nature.
So let's talk about your investors, because you and Dom, in regards to this 52 unit, you and Dom realized you could pick this up for 1.2. But you needed to raise, what did you say about
$450,000?
$450,000 from investors. How did you go about doing that?
Well, I think one way. Well, let me explain it to you this way, Brian. I'll have gotten the property under contract. Brian, you're a wealthy man who's owned a few businesses. You got cash sitting on the sidelines. You have some of your money invested in stocks. You have some of your money in bonds. But you are growing, you don't want all that cash tied up in hypothetical things on your computer. You want the security of and interested in real estate. So
without any of the involvement, I don't want to have to fix toilets. So we're going to role play here.
Let's role play. Let's do this.
Because, all right, I'll be the investor who has the money, but doesn't want to go find the deal or take down the deal. I purely got the money.
Correct.
And
all right.
Let's say I'm an accredited investor.
Well, I'm excited to be here with the accredited investor, Brian Hamrick. And so the way I would approach it is I would come to you and say, hey, hi, Brian. My name's Joe. I own a company called Ancora Management, where we specialize in the turnaround of apartment buildings. And I would invite you and I'd show you some case studies of some other apartment buildings that we've done. I invite you to come meet our team and our staff. And we'd usually meet over breakfast or something like that. And I'd say, Brian, I've got this opportunity where I've found this asset in Lansing. It's perfect for our system. We can buy it for $1.2 million. We can get a loan from a local bank for $900,000, and we believe that it would take about $200,000 to fix the property up, allow us to rent the vacant units, and turn the asset around. So what we need from you today, is $450,000. And the way this is structured is very simply, $450,000 you put in is equity. It's treated as a preferred equity, so you get 7% return on the $450,000. You get that paid monthly to you. So, it's 7% interest over the year. So each month from the day we close, you just bring the check to close. The day it closes, every month you receive your 7% check, and that goes out like we pay our vendors. And each month we will bring in the rents from the tenants. We will pay out the bills for everything from property tax, trash, insurance, all the bills associated. We'll also charge a 4% property management fee, which will get paid to Ancora. That's for our time to manage the asset.
And does that come out of my 7%?
Nope, your 7%. You just get your 7% each month.
So it's a preferred 7%. I get that no matter what.
You get that no matter what, whether the property is doing well or doing poorly. I will personally guarantee that you'll get your 7% on your $450,000. And
so you're making a personal guarantee then?
Yep.
Is that in writing?
Yes, that's in writing. We have it structured on a single page promissory note, which kind of details this out. you'll be getting a 7% preferred return. There is no prepayment penalty on your $450,000. So if at any time the company has sitting around $450,000, we can elect to give you all your $450,000 back. At the time you get your $450,000 back, you then obviously would no longer receive the 7% preferred return. And then you would also receive 50% ownership in the asset. So in this asset, Grove Park, we believe we can get it full assets. Stabilized apartment deals in Lansing are trading in the 37 to 40,000. Assets in Kalamazoo that are stabilized assets are trading at about 40,000 a door. We are buying this at about 20,000 a door. So the strategy is that we're going to put 5,000 to 8,000 in per unit. Plus, we're going to be doing some common areas. So our goal is to kind of be in to the asset for around 29 a door. We believe it will appraise and be worth when we can sell it for 40,000 a door. So our plan is to spend the next year to 2 years turning the asset around, pulling an appraisal at the end of the turnaround, giving you all your $450,000 back. And then from here on, as long as we own the asset, you'll be receiving 50% of the distributions that the asset produces.
So let me see if I have this straight. So you're going to guarantee me 7% return on the $450,000 that I'm going to put up. But you can pay me back that $450,000 anytime. But as long as you have it, I'm receiving 7% interest.
That's
so basically, correct. That's a loan that I'm giving to you at 7%.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. But even once I get that money back, I still have 50% equity
forever
in the property.
Correct.
Forever. So I'm a partner forever with 50% equity.
Correct. So in this asset, you would receive, we're into it for roughly $1,450,000. We refinance. So our bank loan each month is $1,450,000. The asset we believe is worth 1.9 or 1.95. So there's $500,000 in equity. So in the year that you had your money with us, you got, $31,500 and then you also got all your $450,000 back on paper. And I believe realistically, you have another $250,000 that we created for you in equity, which we could sell the asset if we decide, if we sell the asset, it has to be decided by both you, Brian, and myself to make sure neither of us can force a sale of the asset. And
who decides whether we're going to sell the property or not?
It has to be. I
can't force the sale.
You can't force the sale.
Sell this,
and I can't force the sale.
So we have to agree.
We have to agree.
And what happens if we don't agree?
Then we have to keep it.
Okay. So if you want it, so basically it defaults then to if you want to keep it. It defaults to whoever wants to keep the property.
Yes, exactly. Now, there is a 5-year balloon on your $450,000. So if you don't get your money back in 5 years, then there can be an opportunity to force a sale because your loan has ballooned and we need to pay your $450,000.
So it's a 5-year hold. So there's basically a 5-year limit anyway.
There's a 5-year limit, but we try to get the money back in less than 36 months is our goal.
Okay, so doing a cash out refi or a sale. So no matter what, so it seems like there's 3 benefits here. I'm getting 7% interest on my money.
Correct.
Or 7% preferred return is really more correct. I'm also getting 50% of the cash flow.
Correct.
And 50% of the equity buildup as well.
That's right.
Okay. That sounds pretty good.
And I think for people out there looking to raise money, I think the most important thing is having a very clear structure. Now, this structure works for myself and Dom. This might not work for you and your investors. This might not be what works for everyone out there. But I think what is really important is having a very clear set of expectations. Your expectation if you invest with us, is that you receive that check on the first of the month. It's in your mailbox. You can walk down there and you'll get it every month. And we take that check that's delivered each month extremely serious. It's our trust and it's our bond with those who've entrusted us with their money. A lot of our investors they've owned businesses. They're retired now. They've worked their entire life for the opportunity to have this money to invest. I think one mistake I see a lot of people making is the day they get the pledge from an investor to do a deal, they think that's a time to celebrate, and they're really excited and happy. Every time we get that pledge, I kind of feel kind of a weight of responsibility that it's now time to actually do our job. Our job isn't to raise money. Our job is to build communities and be a good steward of other people's money. So I celebrate, and I'm extremely ecstatic the days that we do our refinances and we get our investor their cash back, and I feel confident that I held up my end of the bargain.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a huge responsibility when you work with an investor and they put up their money, their hard-earned money to invest with you, and really, it's an investment in you.
Correct.
As opposed to the property, because a lot of the investors I work with have never even seen the property, but they know me and they're investing with me, and I'm sure it's the same way with you.
Yeah, I mean, you worked really hard. Both of us have worked really hard for that reputation, and it's worth a lot. It's kind of invaluable, and I found, especially in this area, that reputations, really travel quickly. And if you are acting in a manner or not being a good steward of other people's funds, the word gets around town pretty quickly.
Going back to the returns that you're offering to your investors, what is your projection, or what's the sweet spot you try to hit as far as the internal rate of return, or what I like to call the annualized return?
I feel really I'm really not good on my financial projections for internal rates of return. What we try to do is cash flow in the area of about $2,500 to about $10,000 a month is kind of free cash flow. We don't really look at, because in these deals, Dom and myself aren't putting up any of our own money. The investor, all we're promising them is the 7%, and we all look at that cash flow as kind of a gravy extra. And we don't want to be partnered with anyone who's looking for 12, 15, 20% returns. We find that the people who approach us and are looking for a 20% internal rate of return oftentimes have a very different temperament than the temperament we enjoy working with in our investors. But I'm looking right here at our deal here at Grove Park. That one will have about $4,600 a month if we can keep it above 90% full after it's stabilized. So that's kind of the rate of return we're looking at.
So $4,600 a month cash flow. Of which you and Dom keep half of that, and the other half goes to your investors.
And hopefully by the end of this year, they'll have all their cash back. So calculating an internal rate of return on no money that either person is invested, I mean, that's kind of our strategy. Yeah. But so we don't have...
And the nice thing is, once they do get all their money back, they still have 50% equity. So that money from there on out is an infinite return.
Correct.
They no longer have any money in the actual deal.
And very rarely do we do distributions while that money is still outstanding for the investor. We are using that money to continue to do repairs and build our cash balances.
When you say you do distributions to the investor or to...
Correct. So that 7% returns coming out. So like a situation like Grove Park.
So they're getting it's kind of like a fixed 7% return. You're not giving them more on top of that. You're reserving any additional money that might be there in cash flow to put back into the property.
That's correct. With the ultimate goal of getting to that refinance.
Gotcha.
So when you're investing in our deals, especially a turnaround deal, very rarely we'll find a really good deal that's already cash flowing really well day one. We have a few of those, but in a situation like Grove Park, our expectations that are set with the investor is those first 2 years, there won't be excess cash for distributions. We'll be using that cash to continue to upgrade the property or build our cash reserves as we prepare for our takeout loan.
Now, at the end of a 5-year period, let's say you have a 5-year balloon on your loan. If the investor says, well, let's just do a cash out refinance, I want to stay in, is that an option?
Yes. Yeah, that's an option.
So they can stay in it for life if they want to.
That's our goal, is to have a person who our goal is to create a partnership with our investor on each property where they get all their cash back as quickly as we reasonably can get it returned, and be partners for life where neither myself or Dom nor our investors have cash still in the deal. That's what we're always shooting for. That's what we're going for.
And at the end of that 5-year period, if the investor says, I want to hold on to this, but you and Dom say, no, it's time to sell, who gets their way at that point?
Well, we'd have to hold on to it.
Oh, so you would hold on to it
Yep.
Okay. And what about, now you're not talking about syndication here. It seems like you have 1 or 2 investors who are putting up the money for each deal. Is that correct?
Yeah. So on a $450,000 deal, we usually have 2 partners. So one person will raise $200, the other person raises $250, one person raises $100, and we kind of split the 50% ownership up as appropriate in that.
So that's
manner.
a good way to keep it simple. Have you looked at the syndication model where you pull together multiple investors?
So that's something I've really been interested in. We've talked off podcast about that. It's something that as we look at larger and larger deals, syndication, might be the future for us. Dom and I have been really fortunate to have done very well on our turnarounds of what we have now, and we have investors who want to do more deals. I mean, after they've gotten 3 deals where they've gotten their cash back, have it recycled, they're ready to do some more deals. So we're actively hunting for more assets. But as we look to grow, we want to, by 2020, to get up to 1,000 units at Ancora. So we've got some more acquiring that we have to do between now and then. But syndication is something that really has got my attention.
Yeah, so it's definitely a more expensive process because you have to have a private placement memorandum. Acquisition fees are built into the purchase. And not to mention the legal fees, which can get up there too when you're doing syndication. But that's the way I've done my last 3 big deals, and I like it.
Yeah.
it's a good way to go.
And that's what I like, sharing these stories and talking to other investors like yourself. I think it's really important to listen to how other people are structuring deals. And not that you're going to copy and do the exact same way, but it allows you to look at, because there's certain deals that don't fit our model, and we pass on a lot of deals that don't fit our model, which I still think are great opportunities. There's real value there, but they need to be structured in a different manner than we normally structure our deals. So syndication might be a great fit for deals of that kind.
Yeah, especially once you get into the larger deals where you're borrowing over $3 million.
So we actually, I've recently in December gotten into assisted living, and those deals get sizable. I mean, those are $20 million purchases. So syndication is kind of the way that a lot of those investors and property management companies go in that arena.
Before we get into the assisted, then let me just ask you if anyone has questions about your case study or the way that you work with investors. Is it okay if they get in touch with you?
Yeah, that would be great. You can find our website at Ancora, Ancora, properties.com. Also, if you type in just to the search URL box in Kalamazoo.apartments, not Kalamazoo.apartments.com, just Kalamazoo.apartments, you'll also find our website. And my email address is just joe@ancoraproperties.com. Feel free to shoot me an email. I love getting together with other investors. And if you want to take a tour of any of what we've got going on, if I've got time, I'm happy to set something that up if people are interested.
Great, and I'll make sure I put that in the show notes too. Let's talk about the assisted living facilities, because that's a new thing that you're now part of, and you've purchased a couple of them.
Yeah.
Talk about that. How'd you get into that, and how's it going?
So I've always been attracted and interested in senior living. It's a rapidly growing segment of our population. I believe it's an honorable career path to pursue. And I'd been wanting to get into senior housing since all of 2015. And I met up with a really great guy named Chuck Gray, who had a lot of experience in senior housing. And Chuck had owned and still owns 8 senior living properties around the country. He was actively looking for the opportunity to start a property management company and go after pursuing acquisitions in a different manner than he was before. He was syndicating before. So Chuck and I got together and we started a company called Cardinal Senior Management. We closed on our first property in December of 2015, 2 assisted living buildings in Pennsylvania. We have a 131 unit and a 110 unit assisted living building. About 150 staff members or employees that work there 24/7. We do all the ADLs, from bathing to med management, full activities department, bus, a full assisted living operation. In Pennsylvania, it's actually called personal care. So they're technically personal care homes. And I've just really fallen in love with doing senior housing. The numbers are a lot larger in senior housing. The rent rolls are a lot larger. The challenges are bigger. You've got a lot more moving parts, where in apartment deals, you really only have, the only real things to watch. There's a lot of things to watch in apartment deals, but, your big ones are watching vacancy, watching maintenance and repair costs, and watching your accounts receivable. Those are the 3 large areas. And your biggest bills in apartments are your management fee, your taxes, and your insurance. And your taxes and your management fee really aren't negotiable. And your insurance rate, you really only visit that once a year. So after you get an apartment building stabilized, it's easy to kind of keep growing your portfolio, whereas with assisted living, you've got 7 different department heads. You've got everything from a lot more staff. So it's more challenging, but there are really opportunities for great returns in senior housing.
Yeah. Well, and you say you have 110 employees, so it's
150.
150 employees. So it's obviously a lot more labor intensive too. That's a lot of employees.
Yes, a lot of hourly staff.
240 beds.
Yep.
Basically.
Exactly. Because you're also doing that 24/7. I mean, you have to staff that on holidays. You have to staff that nights. You have to do shift changes. You have to have people available for call-offs. I mean, it's a real business.
Yeah, and there's a lot of differences between that and apartments. So you are now kind of asset managing these two new properties that you purchased in Pennsylvania.
Correct.
Are you also actively managing them as well?
Yeah, I mean, I was just there, I think last week, doing our Employee of the Month celebration and meeting with staff. Chuck handles a lot of the day-to-day details with Cardinal Senior Management, but I'm definitely very involved. I know all of our department heads. We weekly conference calls. It's very involved with the staff there and the property there.
What's the learning curve like between a multifamily and senior care?
I guess my personal experience, I didn't think the learning curve was that steep. I've been really, really fortunate in my senior housing experience and really fortunate in my apartment experience to have really been surrounded by some really intelligent, really respectable mentors. Chuck's really taken me under his wing and showed me what it means to being assisted living and being in personal care. So with, being with him every day, I felt like I picked it up pretty quickly. And I think if you have an open mind and are willing to learn and check your ego at the door, it can be very helpful to, you can learn pretty quick, I think is.
And it definitely helps that you have a partner who's experienced in this area.
Yeah, that was very helpful.
Were it not for him, I'm sure it would be a much steeper learning curve.
I would agree with that.
And how are the economics of senior housing compared to multifamily?
Well, the thing about senior housing is you've got, average rent anywhere from $3,000 to $6,000 a month, whereas average rent on our apartments are anywhere from $650 to $900. So in senior housing, we took that building over and it was about 70% full. So when you take something from 70% full and you add 30 residents, and your 30 residents are averaging $3,000 in revenue per resident, you're seeing, the amount you can end up in free cash flow is extremely, more volatile. You get it on both sides. So if you have a move out in apartments, it's changing the bottom line. But if you have 10 move outs in the senior housing, the numbers can get big and they can get small really quickly.
Mm-hmm. How do you go about filling those vacant units? Is it a marketing thing?
Yeah, we found an asset that wasn't the sales and marketing wasn't taken seriously. We hired 2 full-time sales and marketing people. We started partnerships with third-party referral sources. So we use caring.com, A Place for Mom. Like in the apartment business, they would be similar to apartments.com or another paid third-party providers.
And that's helped you go and improve your occupancy then? Yeah,
and we also got a bus. We have huge, giant pictures of all of our residents on our bus, and it says, "We love our seniors." And we actually got the bus in Tennessee, and I drove the bus from Tennessee to Pennsylvania. So I took it through the Appalachian Mountains, and it was a lot of fun. But I think also we do a lot of outreach on Facebook, involved in the community. We think with assisted living that our secret sauce is activities. We really increase the budget for the activities department. We market those pretty heavily.
So this has all been fantastic information. And as we wrap it up, I kind of want to go back to the beginning. Joe, back in high school and going into college. Knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently?
What would I have done differently? Well, I'm really pleased with how everything has gone. And I think some of the mistakes that you make turn out to be what taught you a lesson that you were able to learn later on. I think one of the mistakes I think I would have made is I was pretty headstrong when I started about believing in what I was doing. And during the recession, there were some opportunities to purchase some assets, which I knew were good assets. I knew they were good purchases, but some people around me were, worried, and I kind of passed on a few things that I think looking back, could have been a little bit more aggressive on. But I think trusting your gut is something that had been, or trusting what you believe and what you're seeing, and you don't need to be validated by things you read in the newspaper or other people around you's opinions.
So your gut was telling you, hey, these are some good deals here, but you might have had some naysayers who were saying, don't do it.
Exactly. And I think there's a few deals I had passed on. I look back and the only reason I passed on it was someone who's never done any real estate, who knows nothing about Grand Rapids, thought it was a bad idea. So that, I don't know why I listened to them, but it's a lesson.
Yeah, I would, during 2009, 2000 through 2012, I would go to real estate seminars and conventions and say, hey, I'm buying in Michigan, I'm buying in Grand Rapids. And people are like, whoa, that's a terrible place to invest in. And, the banks had basically, what do you call it, redlined a lot of Michigan, including Grand Rapids during that point, which meant for these larger commercial type loans, they didn't even want to make the loans here in West Michigan. But it turns out that was the perfect time to be buying.
I couldn't agree more. And just trusting your intuition, and you did the research, and you found the way, and you got to go with your system.
Absolutely. And what advice would you have then for people looking to get? Well, let's say, what advice would you have for younger people who are in college listening to this? Would you say do what I did? Buy a house and rent it out to your friends, or what might you say to them?
I really, and I advise a lot of my friends on this. I meet with other young people often about this. I think it is such a great opportunity in Grand Rapids, if you're willing to live with roommates, to buy a 4-bedroom house, because you can't have more than 4 unrelated people living in a house together. I got hammered pretty hard on that, so I don't do any 5 or 6 bedroom houses anymore.
That's a city compliance.
It's a city compliance rule, so don't break that. They're very serious about that. But you can buy a $120,000 house here in Grand Rapids, put 5% down. You can do some cosmetic upgrades, live in one of the bedrooms and rent all the other bedrooms out at $425 a room. You can go from spending $700 a month for a 1-bedroom apartment to not having a house payment. And I think it's a great way to get started for whether it's young people or anyone who's looking to get started. I think the route of having roommates is not right for some people, but it might be right for some others. I know when my wife and I got married, we still had roommates that we lived with up until about a year ago. We've always had roommates. It's a great way to have some extra income, and it might not be a route that a lot of people are thinking about.
And advice for those who maybe they are married, maybe they just don't want to have roommates at all. Maybe they're a little bit older, they're not in college anymore. What would you say to them if they want to get into real estate?
I always joke with people about this advice, but I think it's very, very true. Real estate is a get-rich-slow business. It's not, you're not going to hammer it and hit it a home run on your first deal. And frankly, you look at our portfolio of 464 units, it took a sizable amount of units before the cash flow really showed up. This isn't a line of work where you're going to be a millionaire overnight from what I've seen. And the people who do the best and end up in the best position, they've been doing it for a long time, and they have conservative principles, and they see the long game and play the long game.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a great note to end this conversation on. So, Joe, I really want to thank you for taking the time to come here and talk to me today and just share all this great information. And you certainly have a lot of fantastic experience, and I'm glad you were willing to share it with us today.
Thank you, Brian. It's been a pleasure.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.